Today's topic is climate change. Are we up to the challenge? Climate change is a hot topic, pardon the pun. We need to educate ourselves on not only why the climate is changing, but the effects of this climate change. What will happen if we don't take any action? And more importantly, what can we personally do so we do not contribute to the worsening climate? Our speaker today, Mr. Makbul Rahim from London, England, is a lawyer by training. He has a special interest in the subject, which he has studied deeply. He is currently doing a doctoral research project on enhancing environmental practices in UK faith communities, and I'm sure what he will share with us can be applied not only in the UK, but around the globe. With that brief introduction, Mr. Rahim, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be addressing Baraza Toronto. I've been on these programs before, and I've seen the discussion and heard the discussion, which has been very, very good. So I'm looking forward to a very good discussion on this topic. I have, I'm doing this doctoral research on changing environmental practices in faith communities in Middlesex University. And when I was thinking about what subject to go for to do my research, my advisors and I were discussing, and they told me, there's a team of advisors, they told me that why don't you think in terms of environmental practices and changing them in your own faith communities, So I asked myself, I thought it's going to be very, very easy. It's going to be an easy task to change, practices in one's communities, because all you're going to do is to tell them what is the effect of what you're doing and why you should not do it, and there would be a change. And indeed, I found that this topic of climate change is really a very, very complex matter. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So now you can see my PowerPoint up there. One of the key issue that I want to be addressing and discussing is the complexity of this matter. It is a highly complex subject. It has been described as multifaceted. It has been described as a wicked problem. It has been described as a wicked problem, meaning that every solution that you think of in order to deal with the problem is in fact, causing you more difficulties. And it is a borderless phenomena. It affects everyone wherever you are. It doesn't have any borders of faith, religion, community, country, it's everywhere. It's planet wide, and the impact is felt by everyone, everywhere. This particular picture, I thought of putting there because I wanted to give an impression to people that, look, we're taking so much for granted when you look at the sky and we see the sun and the moon and the stars, and we see, normality in our atmosphere. But here, this is a picture that is showing perhaps some kind of an eclipse that has just finished, or it is also showing a possibility of the sun being hidden, being covered in all kinds of difficulties, being in difficulty. So the sun being in difficulty. That is the impression that I wanted to share with you. So, as I mentioned, the problem is very complex. And I'm going to discuss this in 5 sections. What is the problem? What is our current situation? And why does this matter to us at all? And then really look at what is happening in the world in terms of, kind of dealing with and addressing this issue of climate change. So I want to talk about the COP26 process that you all would have been very familiar with. It was very well kind of highlighted in social and mainstream media throughout the world of what was happening in Glasgow. And therefore, we'll talk a little bit about that process and what did we actually achieve in that particular process. One thing that I will also explain is how did you get to this COP26 process and what did we achieve? And then, what are the key issues of tension, compatibility, conflict in considering and dealing with these issues? And then what are the barriers of change? And what is it that we can all do to achieve COP26 goals? So in terms of the problem, we know that this is an enormous problem. There is a full-blown emergency crisis that is felt by everyone. So when you go and look at what is happening throughout the world, the floods and the various changes in, in seasons and the storms, and when you think in terms of all the climate disasters that are taking place, we see people losing their homes. You had something in Vancouver. There was a huge flood that took place in Vancouver, and a lot of people were affected because they had to be evacuated because of the floods from the towns that they were living in. And therefore, there's such huge impact on the humanity. If we are all very comfortable in our homes and suddenly we find our streets are flooded with water and water getting into our homes and really kind of spoiling everything, the furniture and everything, it is huge. It's a huge thing because we have, it's come right in our house. And this is what is happening to a lot of people in Bangladesh and in other countries, in coastal states. There are a lot of, the tsunami was a very good example of what happens when people, get such catastrophic events and how it affects their lives. And all of this is, kind of boiling down to one thing, and that is greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, methane, and the accumulation of carbon concentration in the atmosphere. So it is stated that the current level of concentration is in the region of 412.5 parts per million. And this was in 2020. And, this is rising now. This is rising. And, you heard in the COP26 that now people are thinking in terms of, 450 ppms, parts per million, etc. And there's such a rise in global temperature under the current trajectory without any cuts in emissions. If we continue as we are, it is expected that our current temperature will go to 2.4 degrees centigrade by 2050, and we'll go to 5 degrees by year 3000. So we are at the moment, we have a kind of a top ceiling of 1.5, and we are between 1.1 and 1.2 at the moment. So we find that, this problem, which includes the sea level rising. So if you were in Maldives, or if you lived in, the Pacific Island countries, you'd find that the seas are rising, and, there's a great risk, existential risk to people who are living there. Because there will be submergence of the land underwater. And so therefore, countries like Marshall Islands and Vanuatu and Kiribati in the Pacific and Maldives and other countries and Haiti and other places in the Caribbean, you'll find that these islands, they do fear an existential risk because of levels of seas rising and the melting of the polar ice and the glaciers. And we also have this risk of temperatures rising so much that certain parts of the world would not be inhabitable. Like, for example, in the Middle East, you might well find a situation where the temperatures which are averaging 40 degrees to 50 degrees centigrade in certain countries, and this is the Middle East countries, may well go higher. And that may make life very difficult for people. And they may even be forced to emigrate in certain seasons to other parts of the world. So you might then get climate refugees, in addition to the conflict zone refugees, and in addition to the economic migrants. So this is the whole thing. And you also may have seen in some of these clips, the wild forest fires that have been taking place even in places like Greece, in Europe. So in California, so you have quite a clear and manifestation of the problem that you can see in what is actually happening. And there's of course the issue of pollution itself, when this is plastic pollution and air pollution, which is leading to smog and smoke in many parts of the world, and the deforestation, which is our carbon sink that absorbs the carbon dioxide. The forests, the rainforests, is in fact because of deforestation is being reduced. The area is being reduced, and therefore the carbon sinks are being reduced. And there's also a loss of biodiversity. So we have a huge spectrum of problems. And our current situation is that we are globally energy dependent. We cannot do without petrol. We cannot do without diesel. We cannot do without electricity. We cannot do without gas. And therefore, everything in our life depends on electricity. The fact that we are having this conversation, our internet, everything depends on electricity, energy consumption. So our lives are so much intertwined with energy consumption, energy production, and the fallout from that energy production. So you find that current lifestyles and our living patterns, the way we are, the way we consume things, like different, just keep on buying. It's Christmas coming, Christmas is coming, so you'll already find marketing and Friday deals, to buy, telling us to buy. So you watch television, you watch your YouTube, you watch your any other media, you'll see that there is a lot of pressure being put, marketing pressure being put to consume, to buy more and more and more. And of course, this is resulting in huge waste production. And then we have also pollution from industrial and manufacturing emissions. So, that is itself a very, very big issue. And therefore, all that makes us wonder, what is it? What is it that we can do? It's where can we make a change? So, we have a current situation of energy dependency. We have a global warming that is taking place under our very noses, and it's taking place every day. And we have the disasters that we see on the television, in our news. And then we have our current lifestyles, totally our living patterns, where we are using electricity, we're using gas, we're using cars, we're using all these consumption products. And we are creating huge amount of waste, and we are dumping it. And that is being dumped in the dumping sites. And a lot of pollution is being created, pollution from the industrial emissions, and pollution from plastic pollution. So, you have this issue of using the throwaway plastic, which is used and thrown once, used once and thrown away. So you get a lot of plastic that is being wasted. It's quite interesting that in the month of Ramadan, you will find that, we have, if you just have our iftars, and you don't think in terms of plastic pollution, and you keep on throwing away your throwaway plastic cutlery, it's amazing. The Muslim communities throughout the world and other other religions that have their events, and other communities that have their events, be it Christian, Judaic, Hindu, others, they are creating, if they don't take care or deal with this plastic pollution, they themselves will be creating a lot of pollution. So this slide, I'm asking the question, why does climate change matter? It matters because there is pollution from the air, smoke and smoke. So you find that places like India and other countries, they are really suffering from smoke and smoke pollution. The air, even in places like Tehran, you know, it's very polluted air because of the smoke and smoke problems. So this is the pollution coming from the various activities. And then we have the pollution of plastic and pollution of the oceans, the rivers and the waterways. So now, one other reason why climate change should matter to all of us is not only that we can see the very bad side, the very difficult things that we are seeing. Our globe, our planet, our global planet, our Earth is being, kind of attacked through degeneration of the environment, and we can see the effects. But there's other issues like ethical issues. So you've got to ask ourselves, we are, at this moment, whatever we have got at the moment, whatever state of our current living standard, etc., it is, if we do not change our current patterns, then the next generation is going to have more problems. And the following generation will have more problems. So as I mentioned, you will have global warming in year 3000, 5 degrees centigrade, which is devastating and disastrous. So you can see that there is a huge ethical issue here. What are we doing? We need to do something, because we can't say, okay, I looked out of my window, there's no flood. And I have reasonably good house with my facilities. I'm feeling it's winter, but I've got a lot of electricity and I've got a lot of heating. So I'm okay. So if I'm okay and I can see no problem outside my window as I look outside my house, we still have to think in terms of what is the ethical issue for us? What is our responsibility? Because it could well happen to us. And as you noticed, in Vancouver, in other places, it just comes. The floods come and the devastation then takes place. So we have this ethical issue that we have to look at, and the eco-justice. Since the earth is one system, if you generate emissions, carbon dioxide and methane emissions in whichever part of the world, you are adding to the world climate problem. And therefore, it is linked so much to economic development. So the more economically developed you are, therefore the industrialized countries and the developed countries, they have made great progress, but they have also had great emissions. Their carbon emission has been very big compared to the ones that are undeveloped or developing still. And they are behind in their industrial development, economic development. And we find that there is a tilting of the balance. The balance is really against those countries that are not industrialized or not developed. So we like so much to go on holidays, to go those countries where the beaches are clean, where the atmosphere is good, that we can have a good time and have a break. But those countries do not have the industrial development. And because they are behind in the industrial development, therefore they are emitting less, but we are emitting more, but we want to preserve all those areas for our holidays. So we have a kind of a problem of our concept of justice and what we should be doing about this. So there are conflicting interests, and there are, of course, social, political, national, and international interests. So if countries like China and India and Australia, they want power plants to be, giving lots and lots of electricity to meet the electricity demand. Because, one way of measuring development is to measure your electricity consumption of the nations, the countries' electricity consumption will determine how high you are in your development thing, because the more industries you have, the more activities you have, the more electricity you will need, both in the houses, residentially, domestic, and also in industries. So you'll be using a lot of electricity. So we have this thing that there are many countries that want to still develop, and they want to continue developing, and they see the development in terms of power plants burning coal, and power plants which are burning fossil fuels, including coal. Coal is really a dirty, environmentally dirty, fossil fuel, which emits lots and lots of carbon dioxide and other gases. So we have conflicts in terms of some countries, they want to develop, they want to continue developing. In fact, we know of instances where some countries even pulled out of climate agreements because they wanted to continue. They didn't want restrictions at all to be placed upon them. So now the key area of tension, as I mentioned, is the economic and national strategy interests of different countries vis-a-vis protection and sustainability of the planet. So now what are we going to give a higher weighting to? Are we going to ensure that we protect our environment and our planet and protect its sustainability? Or do we continue developing and developing and developing and using and consuming energy and whatever it takes, regardless of sustainability of the environment? It is an area of tension, because at some point the earth will say it's too much. You have used the earth's resources totally, and now it is too much to bear, and therefore there'll be manifestations. The manifestation will be higher temperatures because those gases trap the heat. These are the gases which are being emitted, which trap the heat. And therefore we have this tension between development and sustainability. We have the tension between economic development, conservation of the nature, and natural resources. And in our own lifestyles, we are increasing our carbon footprint. So if you look at, if you ask ourselves, how many of us are calculating our daily carbon footprint in everything that you do, whatever you do? There are calculation mechanisms that are available on internet that you can calculate your carbon footprint. What is your daily carbon footprint? But this modern lifestyles are increasing the carbon footprint. And there are so many examples of modern lifestyles. And this is in fact such an emerging and a daily process. It's a growing problem. And then we have energy demand growth, energy in the form of oil, gas, and coal, and using domestic fossil fuels and emitting more. In terms of our modern lifestyles, we even have, we have to think in terms of methane, which is emitted by cattle. And all this big cattle ranches that they kind of are geared to providing the meat to the whole world. You find that they are emitting a lot of methane, and that is a problem that is being added to the world's problem. Then there is pollution, and you mentioned about our current lifestyle. Now, what we need to do is to think in terms of what is called circular economy. It means that in everything that you do, everything that you use, you have to ask yourself, are you minimalistic, or are you really going on a spree? Are you just consuming without any regulation, without any control on yourself? So, you could be consuming a lot of things without caring at all about the environment. On the other hand, you could be saying that, look, I don't need to do all that. I can become very simple in my lifestyle. I don't need to have 2 cars. I can have 1 car. I don't need to have, if I have a petrol or a diesel or a gas car, I can move to electric car. So there are a lot of ways in which I can think in terms of simplifying my life, in my life pattern, in my lifestyle. So the circular economy say, okay, you reduce your consumption, you reuse whatever you are consuming, you recycle, and you are very careful about the disposal. The disposal should be environmental friendly. So deforestation, logging, cash crop production, and biodiversity. So all the furniture that you'll keep on buying, all the new furniture that you'll keep on buying, and changing. If you want to change your furniture every couple of years and want to look for more and more trendy and modern things, you are contributing to deforestation. If it is, then the issue there is all these forests are being cleared to grow cash crops as well, and therefore there is also loss of biodiversity. Now, I want to talk about how did we get to COP26. So these climate discussions have been going on for a very long time. It began in 1988. So it's not that the world is unaware that there is a big climate problem that we have. The entire world and the various countries, they used to meet from time to time. And in 1988, they set up a intergovernmental panel on climate change to provide scientific knowledge, data, and response strategies on climate change. So already everyone knew there's going to be a problem. This anthropogenic kind of effect that we have, that the men are having effect on the environment because of the intensity and the enormity of the human activity, is going to create problems for humans living in this planet. And so IPCC was formed in 1988, and there was a convention which is called UNFCCC, which is the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was entered into in 1992. And yet this was, if you remember, this is called the Rio de Janeiro, summit, where this convention was signed. And in this convention, everyone kind of got this, the objective, which this is ratified by 195 countries of the world. And, the objective of this convention was to stop dangerous, anthropogenic, man-made interference with the climate system, to stop it. So to deal with that. Okay, so that was the intention. But you then also had to have mechanisms to do that. So in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was ratified. And this Kyoto Protocol, what it did is it actually set out legally binding emission targets, applicable to the developed countries only. So they were saying at that time that, look, we are going to ask all these developed countries, the industrialized countries, to bind themselves legally to say, okay, we will not emit. We will have targets on our emissions. We will have caps on our carbon and methane emissions, so that we do not affect the world negatively. So this was Kyoto Protocol. And in the middle, we have, the COP. So the COP 26 that was really the 26th COP that took place. So every year there has been a COP. And this COP itself is, the Committee of the People. It is the decision-making agency of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So they actually make decisions through COPs, this Committee of the People. And even the Kyoto Protocol was agreed in one of the COPs meetings. Now in 2015, the Kyoto Protocol, which applied really only to the developed countries, it was replaced by Paris Agreement 2015. So in 2015, the Paris Agreement was entered into, and it replaced Kyoto. And this one, where under the Paris Agreement, we had to have voluntary commitments to reduce emissions, which are determined by each country themselves. So they have to voluntarily say, okay, we are going to emit. But this applied both to developed countries and the developing countries. And they had to report on them every 5 years. But there was no enforcement mechanism. So there was no, if they did not comply, there was nothing anyone can do about it, because these are sovereign countries. And there was a pledge that we are going to try to stay within 2 degrees centigrade global warming, only 2 degrees centigrade, and also to limit it to 1.5. So to try to limit it to 1.5, but 2.2 was kind of the top ceiling, and to limit to go for a net zero carbon future by 2050. And there was to be a global stock taking every 5 years to monitor what steps have been taken. And this has then resulted in COP26. So you can see that COP26 in Glasgow Summit, Glasgow, UK, it took 33 years from IPCC, the scientific body, and 29 years from the convention, 16 years from Kyoto, and to get to Paris Agreement, and from Paris Agreement to get to Glasgow. So you can see it has been a very long, slow process. In Glasgow, there were renewed attempts to bring more and more energy to cutting the emissions. There were ideas about climate finance to be made available to the developing countries in order to enable them to start emitting less, to control the emissions, and also for loss and damage finance, which they had already suffered because of the emissions which have been produced by the developed countries. And the countries were asked to revisit and strengthen their pledges by the end of 2030. So we find that by 2020, they needed to kind of take a stock take and explain exactly what has happened. And so there was to be this particular, so this is one big development that took place. The idea was to get to net zero future by 2050 and to try to ensure that we are now controlling the environment to the best of our abilities. You know that in 2016, the US withdrew from Paris Agreement, but the Paris Agreement continued. And therefore, we then ended up with COP26. So my assessment of COP26 is that it's a very, very slow process. It is very slow in implementation of decisions. The expectations of many vulnerable countries in the developing world were not met. There was a pledge to make 100 billion per annum available for developing countries by the developed countries, which was not yet set up by 2020. There was an expectation that there will be no new coal-fired power plants and the existing ones would be phased out. It was not done, it was not phased out. It is like phasing down, but not phasing out. The other, on the positive side, you see this is the first COP decision to target action against fossil fuels, and it called for phasing down of unabated coal and inefficient fossil production. The other thing we find is, which is hugely impressive to everyone who saw that, in Glasgow, we had this manifestation of the civil society, the youths, the children, the people of the world, all being involved. They were very interested. They wanted to make sure that we are doing something about climate. And they were trying to put pressure on the decision makers by coming there and demonstrating and putting kind of having rallies. Greta Thunberg as a school child trying to put pressure, so we have great kind of enthusiasm. And there was some agreement covering coal deforestation and methane. One thing that the COP26 did is to say that, look, 1.5 is our total target. And we should go for 1.5 degrees. And there were some processes that were agreed for financing from 2025, etc. And many governments pledged, like, that they would stop coal production, coal use by certain dates, 2070 for India, for example. And there was action there were a lot of governmental pledges that were made. And there was action also by the private sector who said, okay, we are now going to go for net zero carbon by the end of the century. So now, right. So I think I have moved the slides a little bit further ahead. So if I can go behind and see, let me see if I can go and go back to the slide that I wanted to show you. All right, so.
Open the PowerPoint.
Sorry?
Open the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm opening it, yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay, so the PowerPoint is back with us now. So now, there was an IPCC report as well that if you want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, you have to make sure that carbon dioxide emissions are falling below 45%, below the 2010 levels by 2030, and to net zero by 2050. So this is quite a big step that needed to be taken. So now we were assessing COP26 and looking at the positive, we were at the positive impacts. So there was a huge interest, and there were a lot of pledges. The private sectors started coming into it and say, look, in our own areas, which are all business activities, we should be aiming for net zero emission by the middle of the century. So now for us, we have to say, okay, there's going to be another COP 28 and 27 next year, 2020, 2022, and we shall see what will actually happen. But for us, and I think this is really important for us to be talking, that we now know, we learn from this COP26 process that the people who are trying to make decisions are global decision makers, they are sovereign countries, and this was what is called a top-down approach. They were making the decisions from the top, which will affect everyone. But this was too slow and bureaucratic, and it is not really effective. And that there was no mechanism to enforce against sovereign states. And there were a lot of national, international, and strategic interests that were affecting their implementation. And that's why we have to start thinking in terms of a bottom-up approach. So now we've got to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do as individuals and communities to make change? We have to make change. We have to make behavioral changes in various contexts and settings in specific areas. So for example, it's quite interesting that if you start thinking about the various things that we can actually do, you see, take cars. We are using, take our transport industry. We are using personal cars and we are using fuel. So one thing that we can do is to move to electric cars, right? And to go for public transport and to try to go for as much non-utilization of the cars as we can, walking, cycling, other activities. The renewable energy is another area that instead of using fossil fuels, we should be using solar panels, wind energy, and wave energy, and other renewable energy sources. And for that, we have to put pressure as consumers that we want renewable energy. We don't want electricity that is coming from coal. We don't want electricity that is coming from gas. We don't want electricity that is coming from fossil fuels. We want electricity that is coming from renewable energy. And in renewable energy, you can actually set up solar panels in homes and other places in your businesses where you actually generate solar energy, which you can even sell to the grid. And then the issue about personal footprints that we have to see how we can reduce our carbon footprint. How can you waste reduction? How can you become stop our excessive consumption? And the other thing is we have to ask, what are the various communities? What is the experience of various communities in making the change? So when you look at change making in communities, you can either have bottom up or top down. So we discussed about top down. So you see communities, the decision makers will make rules, will make rulings and make decisions that you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, but this is top down. It doesn't work because you need grassroots support for sustainability, and you need so you need actually to see exactly what you can do about this. So you need the top down to help you with the transition, with the process, with the facilitation, etc., and implementation. And you know that coercion is not effective. You can't say we are forcing you to do this. That doesn't work. So we have to get a buy-in from the communities at the grassroots level to make them feel that they should do this for very good reasons. They should reduce their carbon footprint, and they should develop low carbon and low energy focus. So the actions we can take, let's think about how can we create a future where the people as humanity can thrive, and also the nature can thrive. There is a lot of climate activism that is taking place with various NGOs and various organizations that want to fight for environment, they want to preserve environment. There is no reason why we cannot join hand with them and join hands with them and actually consistent with our values. And also developing green toolkits for the communities, like planting trees, doing environmental audits, etc. So I would like to now end up, there are many things you can do, so I want to end up with this picture of the carrot that has just been made ready for consumption. It has just been dug out, and you can see how fresh it is and how beautiful it looks. You just need to wash it and start eating it. So we should be thinking in terms of growing food, in terms of growing our vegetables, and in terms of being nature loving. So inshallah, we should be taking these various steps accordingly. I think I think something has happened to my screen, okay. So the last two things is it's showing how you can be nature loving, how you can take care of the plants, etc. And the last clip is about climate change, how you can be taking care of your gardens, external and internal. Well, thank you very much, and I shall end here.
Thank you, Makbul. That was interesting, lots of useful information. Okay, so let's go to our chat. Makbul, do you want to read out the chat, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think I just opened the chat and I've seen many lovely questions here. There's one question I would like to take first, and that is Bashir Bhai's question about the kind of principles that Islam has talked about in terms of managing the environment and getting equitable reciprocity between
connections look very good.
Human beings and environment. You see, the thing is, I did not speak about Islam in specific terms, though I've done my other lectures about and talked about all the principles that Islam has talked about, but I'll answer that. There is a lot of underpinning principles, very broad principles that Islam has talked about, and in terms of stewardship, in terms of asraf, not excessive consumption, in terms of mizan, balance, in terms of being equitable. So there are wide varieties, and also in terms of the sovereignty of an environment as belonging to God, and that we are not supposed to spoil it, not supposed to excessively use it, but only use it according to our needs and also within certain measure. So there is a balance in terms of we can't abuse, we can't excessively use the environment. And among our own humanity population, we should be very careful of what we are actually utilizing and consuming at the detriment of the other. So we have, yes, and these broad principles in my interfaith conversations with other communities, I find there's a lot of commonality between that. So for example, the Sikh community, the Hindu community, they are all thinking in terms of being very, very balanced in the consumption and utilization, etc. In fact, one of the book, there's a book that Bashir Bhai wrote, has written on, where he has got a chapter on environment, and he has set out very nicely, the various domains in which Islam has looked at the issue of environment. And I would really suggest everyone to look at his book in that particular chapter, which I think was done very well. So if I can get back to the first question, if we reduce our meat intake and shift to plant-based diet, would this help? Yes, it would help. You see, the thing is, the overall question is, and the question that most people ask is, if I do this, or if we do this as a small community, what difference will this make if everyone else is just going about it as if there was no need of any change? So now the issue is, if we as a human community, as a humanity, were to reduce our meat intake and therefore reduce methane emission, it would make a difference to the lowering of the greenhouse. But it's not a single factor thing. We have to do many things in different specific areas. It's not only shifting to meat, it's also taking care of our footsteps in terms of our energy utilization, in terms of deforestation, in terms of consuming, our consumption, etc. So there's a lot. It is not only to do with meat. It is to do with the entire shift, paradigm shift in our entire lifestyle that we need to make, and to start analyzing how we could do this. So for example, one of the ways is to develop empathy with the natural activities. So I know that, Masumin, the Masumin Garden Project has been a very great success. Lots of people, up to 120 more people joined in today. I mean, this time before the end of the season, to actually, grow the various vegetables, to grow the various things that are utilized in external gardens, and there are also projects for internal gardens, etc. So yes, there are so many things that you could be doing at different levels. So I think that what we need is, we need to have some kind of a strategy plan, in which we can say, okay, what are the various steps that we need to take at the grassroots level, in various dimensions, in various domains, in various areas, in order to bring down the greenhouse gas emission to the extent that we can. And, and then to look at the issue of how can we pressurize countries and our governments and our decision makers in various countries to actually follow that, and using our consumer power. So that I would say would be the way we should look at it. The political cycles, 5 years in most developed countries. Sure.
Before you go to the next question, just a suggestion, maybe you want to keep your responses brief. It's already 3:05.
Sure.
I don't know what your timing is like, but there is, if you don't mind, can we go to a question from Jeffrey Eco? You can lower, okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
No, Jeffrey, yep.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Great presentation, Makbul. It was really very, very informative. To some of your points, with regards to what we can do as individuals, I think I think the grassroots movement that you talk about is very, very important. And I think we as individuals need to start making changes, right? Like from us, and all the things that we can do in terms of waste management, taking care of our, lights within our home, our garbage, our environment, etc. And then we extend it to our circle of influence. And then we move on to our community level. I think slowly as we increase, I think the circle of influence increases. And this sort of reduce, repurpose, reuse. And also, I think the mindset change is very, very important. I think we're consuming, we started consuming from need to want. And I think that's the push that we're having, as a community and sort of just the world in general. And I think that's what we need to sort of look at. What is it that we actually need versus what is it that we want or are talked into very, very beautifully. I mean, the advertising market is a huge market, and very appealing. So we need to work to that marketing and use that to our advantage in trying to sort of create awareness in what it is that we can reduce in terms of impact on the environment. And just another thing that's something that I think of very often, especially when we talk about, how much we have single-use disposable, right? We just use something and just throw it away. The very out of sight, out of mind concept. And I think that is another thing that, and if you look at Surah Zilzal,
very quickly, please.
Yeah, sorry. When the earth throws out its burdens, to me, I feel like all the garbage that we're putting in is at one point going to come out and say, this is what it was, right?
MashaAllah, that's excellent.
Thank you.
That's really excellent. That was a very good example of an ayah of the Quran where one is talking about, the earth throwing out all the various, things. The thing is that essentially, I feel, and I agree with you entirely, that one has to make a change at the basic level, which is your individual mindset. And I totally agree with you. We have to. So what are the very small things that we can be doing? So we start moving from the small things without having this inhibiting thought that, oh, this won't make a difference to the world. No, it will make a difference because your mindset is changing. And if you keep on increasing your circles of influence, definitely your community. So for example, I give an example of Portsmouth in UK. Portsmouth community, which is one of the communities in which I was doing research, the management decided that we will just stop plastic totally. And we are going to move to either biodegradable, or we are either going to move to, reusable glass and clay and other, kind of cutlery. And they actually decided on one day that they would do it just before the month of Ramadan. They did it and it stopped. So this was a kind of a very good example of a top down. But before that, there was grassroots movement in the community that wanted to see that kind of change take place. And that grassroots movement was caused by people discussing about plastic pollution and how bad it is. So I also have another example of Toronto, where you actually have, kind of got rid of plastic, and you got a dishwasher, and you have a dishwasher machine that actually takes care of the washing the reusables, and which is cutlery is being used after being washed. This is perfect. But you see, what I think, and I take the point that you are making. The thing is, we have to think holistically. If we can develop a strategy in which we start thinking in terms of what is possible at the individual level, family level, community level, and our society level, our country level, and also think in terms of different domains, different areas where we can make an impact. So for example, you mentioned recycling. Recycling is so very important, and dumping. So, if you go into the circular kind of economy route, you would not be dumping. You'll be recycling, you'll be reusing, etc. So yes, I agree with you, but we need an approach which is holistic, which looks at different levels, individual, family, community, society, and look at it entirely and see what changes can we make.
Great. There are a couple more questions. One is the technological advances to reduce carbon emissions. And also in Canada, we're also talking about carbon capture. Did you come across any of that in your research?
Yeah. The carbon capture technology is seeking to absorb back carbon dioxide,
Yes.
and then store it underground. So we are thinking you see, if you look at the forests and the rainforests, they actually store carbon dioxide in the trees. It is stored inside them because through the process, they give out oxygen, but they store carbon dioxide. And when you actually deforest, when you start clearing the forest, you're releasing a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, the capture thing is all about trying to develop technology to actually ensure that we can, so there the strategy is, look, if we cannot control our emissions, can we control our capture? Can we control some way in which we can neutralize? We can go to net zero from, non-net addition to carbon dioxide. We have to, that has to work in tandem. The technology is there will be developing in due course more and more. One example of technological development is the electric car and the batteries. And now the next development in that batteries is to get better and better batteries, so we can use electric cars with longer lasting batteries and move to that particular area. But eventually, even electric car needs electricity, and it will be sourced by some kind of source. So it has to be renewable. So unless we move the grid to renewable, to wind, to energy, to wind, solar, tidal energies, since the whole thing is so interconnected, and therefore we need to think in terms of all fronts. The private sector and the technological advancements that can take place will be helpful, but we cannot rely upon them. We cannot rely on technology to take care of our problem. It will not take care of our problem because everyone is emitting carbon dioxide as if nothing matters. Everything is being done without any control. And now people are coming around because of this international climate discussion process to say, okay, how can we control it? And therefore the companies are now saying, the banks are saying that we will not lend money unless there is a carbon fact, a carbon and earth impact on earth factor into the various proposals. So you have to show that what is your impact going to be on the earth, on carbon. So everyone is trying to move that, but the thing, no one person, no one element can take care of this. Technology will take it. There's a long lead time before technology can take care of it. In the meantime, let's think, all the carbon dioxide, all the methane, all these gases that are being emitted are causing more and more global warming. So we need to stop it at all fronts. And that's why it is so complex. The problem becomes complex because it is at every end that the problem is, emerging. And it's just like a jelly. You take care of it on this side, it will burst on that side. So we should not be complacent about or reliant on technology. No, we should be careful to say, okay, let us think in terms of technology as a possible help, but it is not enough. And we have to do many things ourselves.
Excellent. We'll take one last question from Dr. Muhammad Hirji. We understand the Earth is millions of years old. Has similar scenarios happened in the past? Wonder if these activities cycle every few centuries so that one civilization is decimated and another civilization replaces it some decades or centuries later.
I think it's an excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
It's an excellent question. I know this is really looking at the broadest time frame. You see, civilizations of humanity are, if you look at various, my understanding is this, that when we talk about impact on humanity, we are not so much talking about the people who may in fact be affected, and they may suffer loss in terms of population, in terms of their own existence. The earth is the thing which is going to remain, and earth can take care of itself because if the human activity is not impacting on the earth, it will take care of itself. But yes, I do understand that there have been instances, though I haven't researched this particular issue very closely. There have been various ages in which humanity has gone through. We know one where the flood took place and everyone was drowned except those who were saved. But we also know of various situations that have taken place in the past, which I haven't researched in detail, but yes. So there is this thing that one result of what we are doing could well be that our civilization as we understand it is going to be affected so badly that it can be decimated partially or wholly, and it can be replaced by another civilization. That is a possibility. Exactly whether it has taken place and what has been the impact of it, I'm not able to answer. But I think that the underlying thought behind this, and the positive thought behind this, is unless we actually take care of the earth, of the global warming, of various things that are affecting our lifestyles and our lives, unless we do take care of them, we are going to suffer the fate of maybe a very significant portion of our civilization being decimated. So when you see all these people dying in floods, all these people dying in various catastrophes, this is slow decimation that is taking place. But of course, we have population growth as well, which is taking place, and also which replenishes the population. So in a sense, it depends on the balance of population, how it's going to be. But we should be thinking in terms of what we can do, because this is kind of a very, very disastrous scenario of the civilization coming to an end and being replaced by another civilization, for which I don't have any material that can actually corroborate that what has happened in the last ages, last few centuries. Of course not. I mean, the Spanish flu was there, and it killed a lot of people, but it didn't decimate the entire civilization. The civilization continued. So, we have had the plague that took place, in Europe. It did not decimate. It affected large number of people. But I don't think there are examples in the last few centuries in which we can give as decimation or total annihilation of civilizations, thankfully.
Right. Well, there's a lot of information on the internet on climate change, and some of the charts I was looking at, and you refer to, some of the information I came across. Our population has increased to almost 8 billion now, worldwide, right?
Yeah.
Industrialization has played its part. And if you look at the carbon emissions in the last 20 or 30 years, if you look at the graphs, it shows that, a gradual increase over decades. And then suddenly from about 80s or 70s, it really starts shooting up, goes way up. And that basically tells you that, yes, it is the human activity which has made a lot of difference. So anyway, there's lots of information there on the internet for those who are interested. The bottom line, the message from you, I guess, is the governments, the financial institutions, the industries, they will do their part, and they have a big part to play. But let's not just wait on them to do their thing. We as individuals should be playing our part. because if we all do it, we can make some small difference to climate change. Wonderful. I have to thank Mohammed Bhai Takim, who is in the audience today. Thank you for joining us, Mohammed Bhai. He is the one who introduced me to Makbul Bhai. So thank you very much. And for those still in the meeting, if you have any contacts or if you know anybody who can give us a good presentation on a subject of interest to our audience, then please refer them to me or contact me, baraza.toronto@gmail.com. That would be great. Next week, Will's Powers of Attorney and Estates. Hope you can join us. But before we close, a big thank you to Makbul Bhai. That was fascinating, lots of information, good discussions, good questions from the audience, which you dealt with very aptly. Thank you again, Makbul Bhai. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure. And I must say that I'm very impressed with the questions that we have got. It has been an excellent feedback. And I'm sure that as this matter is will be discussed further with lots of different platforms and fora and communities, we should come to some kind of a holistic strategy to deal with it on a personal, family, and community basis. And maybe the World Federation, maybe NASIMCO, maybe the various regional bodies, maybe the various world organizations that are there. No, not only with the Muslim communities, but world organizations. They can all be harnessed to help with a holistic strategy, because we do need it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good office. Good office. Yeah.